Imagine you're about to create something brilliant. For instance, an educational course or an interactive seminar or perhaps a workshop for your peers. Great, let's get started. Unfortunately, you are facing the daunting blank page. Quite frustrating, isn't it? But what if I told you that there's a way to turn that blank page into a dynamic canvas filled with ideas that are tailored precisely to your needs and, more importantly, to the needs of your audience? In this video, we will explore how a traditional model for creating educational materials can be supercharged with the power of generative AI. More specifically, we will learn how generative AI can serve as a powerful ally at each step of the so-called ADDIE model. ADDIE is an acronym and it stands for Analysis, Design, Development, Implementation, and Evaluation. The ADDIE model is a commonly used framework for designing educational materials. Now, enhancing this ADDIE model with generative AI can result in engaging, effective, and memorable learning experiences for your audience, whether you're designing an educational course, organizing a training session or a workshop, or maybe even hosting a dynamic seminar. Now, before we dive in, here's a quick disclaimer. The suggestions that are provided by generative AI are meant to enhance our ideas, not to replace the entire process of developing each stage of the ADDIE model. All right, let's get started. So, first things first, let's take a look at the analysis phase, which is the first phase in the ADDIE model. Now, imagine you're tasked with developing a new course or a training session. Before developing any new educational content, it is very important to analyze the current situation. For instance, what are the characteristics of your learners? What are their prior knowledge, their skills, their learning styles? Will your course take place in a classroom or online? Now, during this process, generative AI can serve as a valuable brainstorming partner. It can help you map out the needs and the foundational elements of your course by helping you consider aspects you might not have initially thought of. And this way, it can ensure a solid base for your course, your training session, or your seminar. Here's an example of a prompt that can be useful during the analysis phase. Of course, you can adapt the prompt according to your own specific needs. I need to develop a new course. I will be teaching History of Greece and Rome in the first year of the bachelor's program at my university. Can you help me gain insight into the initial situation of the course so that I have a clear understanding of all the aspects I need to consider when I'm designing this course? Ask me one question at a time. Next, we move on to the design phase, which is the second phase in the ADDIE model. In the design phase, you apply the insights that you gained from the analysis phase to make practical decisions for your course or your workshop. Some of the questions that should be answered during the design phase are, for instance, what would be the objectives of each lesson? What skills or outcomes are you hoping to achieve for each session? With generative AI, you can tap into well-known educational frameworks like Bloom's taxonomy, which allows you to create and categorize learning goals. But it doesn't stop there. Generative AI can also help in designing your lesson plans, and it can suggest interactive elements and strategies for delivering content that aligns with your learning goals. Here's an example of a prompt that can be useful during the design phase. I will be teaching a 13-week, 2-hour weekly course on media literacy to students in their second bachelor's degree. What could an ideal first lesson entail? Additionally, could you suggest some learning objectives using Bloom's taxonomy? The third phase of the ADDIE model is the development phase. This is often the most labor-intensive phase for educators. In this phase, you write your content, you develop your exercises, and you design your graphics, among other things. With generative AI, you can automate and enrich several aspects of the material creation. For instance, AI can help you generate drafts for lectures, or it can create interactive quizzes, and it can even suggest multimedia resources like videos or animations that can make learning more dynamic and more engaging. Now, when you're developing content, however, it is important to remember that generative AI tools are not perfect. They can sometimes produce incorrect answers or they can hallucinate information. So, as an educator, you are always responsible for checking the accuracy of any generated content, and you should always be transparent about your use of generative AI tools. Here's an example of a prompt that can be useful during the development phase. I am teaching French. Help me develop some fill-in-the-blank exercises for irregular verbs in the past tense. Next, we move on to the fourth phase of the ADDIE model, the implementation phase. This is the phase where the instructional strategies and materials that you have created in the previous phases are actually put into practice. Generative AI can assist you in this phase by providing checklists and tips for effective delivery. It can ensure that you're prepared to tackle technical and practical challenges that come with different teaching modalities. Here's an example of a prompt that can be useful during the implementation phase. Are there specific technical aspects that I should consider in advance to offer my online learners a good learning experience? The last phase of the ADDIE model is the evaluation phase. So now that your course or your training session has been designed, developed, and implemented, you need to check whether the learning experience is actually meeting the objectives you set. Did they work as expected? What was the impact for your learners? Here, generative AI can help capture and analyze feedback, providing insights that may not always be obvious, allowing you to refine and improve your course or your workshop for its next cycle. Here's an example of a prompt that can be useful during the evaluation phase. I will be hosting a training session for the first time. How can I measure the effectiveness of my training session? How can I capture improvements for next year? In conclusion, generative AI can be used as a catalyst for innovation across all stages of educational design. From analyzing the initial needs to designing structured educational frameworks, from developing rich interactive materials to implementing these innovations effectively, and finally to evaluating their impacts so that we can continually improve our teaching practices. Generative AI has a role to enhance every step.